Welcome! I'm Michelle Anderson, founder of Clarinet Mentors and author of the How to Play Clarinet More Easily series. I'm so glad you're here to examine the dreaded dum-da-dum-dum high notes on clarinet. Today's video is the first in a series of videos that are designed to help you play high notes more easily. You might want to sign up for the whole series by going to masteringclarinethighnotes.com. So in today's video here, I want to deal with 5 issues. We all, at times as clarinetists, have challenges playing the high notes. And I know at times we feel afraid of them. Well, on the other hand, I'm sure you have players who you really admire who seem to move up into the higher notes from the lower notes effortlessly. They do it smoothly, they have beautiful controlled sound, they're always in tune. Maybe you play in a band with some more experienced players, and some of those players seem to be able to play the very highest notes quite easily. And I imagine you want that for yourself. I know I certainly do. And here's what I need to tell you. You absolutely can have that experience. The high notes do not have to feel harder. In fact, my secret about high notes on the clarinet is that they're really not harder than the lower notes. However, they're way more sensitive and reactable. So if there's something in your playing, some little pointer that you missed along the way, some piece of the clarinet playing puzzle that you don't have, perhaps your air is not moving quite right, or your mouth just isn't quite in the right shape, those high notes are going to feel hard to play. They're going to feel resistant, they're not going to come out. But once you have those pieces in place, they really do come out pretty well as easily as the low notes. And that's the experience I want you to have. The music is so much more fun to play when we're not sitting there being scared that some awful sound is going to come out of our instrument. And I know we've all experienced that. So what I want for you is to have those high notes feel like you're confident that they're going to come out. You're not only confident that they're going to come out, but that they're going to come out with beautiful sound and they're going to be in tune. And that you can move from a low note to a high note and kind of know what it's going to feel like and expect to have success on it. So often we don't have that experience, but you can. My belief is there's about 6 or 7 main aspects of our playing that really contribute to success on the high notes. And each one of these is a very learnable, very trainable system. Some of them are not complicated. Some of them do take some attention and a few weeks of working on certain aspects of your playing, but you can make huge improvements in a month or 2 just focusing on these different aspects of playing. So problem number 1 in having high notes come out easily is that a lot of people play with a reed that's too soft for their clarinet. And that might be you. Now, I'm not going to tell you what the perfect reed strength is, because that's a little different for everybody. Each mouthpiece responds a little bit differently. But I'll give you some guidelines on how you can discover whether you might have the right reed strength or whether your reed might be too soft and causing you some grief on your high notes. What we want when we're a beginning player is a reed that vibrates pretty easily. So usually that's a lower strength. It's less resistant. It's probably a 2, maybe a 2.5. And that one is pretty easy to help us get our first sound. But as you become a more advanced player and you start using your air better and your mouth muscles better, you actually want a reed that's a little bit more resistant, and that's a higher number. So here's a little test that you can do on your clarinet with your reed to discover if your reed might be too soft. What I'd like you to do is play in your higher register, and we're going to take a C scale, starting on that high C that sits right near the top of the staff, where you have all your fingers down in the register key. And I want you to tongue, note by note, all the way up to just your thumb and register key, which is the super high C. I love using the super high C as a tester note because it's incredibly reactive. If there's anything that you're just not quite doing right, that note's going to feel harder to play. And remember, our goal is to make that note feel easy to play. So here's what we're going to try. We're going to start that, and here's what it should sound like if all is working well. Now to me, each of those notes felt fairly similar. They came out fairly comfortably, and I found it pretty easy to play. if my reed were too soft for me, if I was playing on the incorrect size, this is the kind of thing I would hear. And I want you to see if you recognize this in your own sound. That sound right there, not a pretty sound, that kind of that low sound. Some people call it a growl. That's a classic symptom of a reed that's too soft. Now I kind of imitated it by moving my reed lower, which made it act a little bit soft, and then I did some other bad habits to imitate that soft reed. But if you have that experience, you're trying to play those top notes and you get that lower sound, there's not enough support for the reed. Sometimes that's air support, so it could be a sign that your air is wimpy, but very often it's also an indicator that your reed is too soft. What you can try doing is moving your reed a little higher on the mouthpiece, even so that it's a bit above the tip of the mouthpiece. If you move it really high, it's going to be so resistant you're not going to be able to play. But if you just move it a bit high, even if your tone's a little airy and fuzzy, if you do that and your high notes do come out more easily, that's a sure indicator that your reed is too soft. So to give you a very rough guideline, again, knowing that mouthpieces and equipment is different for everyone, and depending on what style of music you play, because generally jazz and klezmer players play on softer reeds, classical players play on a little bit more resistant reeds. I will say, as soon as you're playing any notes in the high register, generally a 2.5 is minimum for what you want to do. And as soon as you're going to high G and up, including that high C, for most people, especially on a more classical vein, a 3 is kind of like the minimum that works well. You need to explore that for yourself, but for many people, this one thing makes their high notes so much easier to play. So don't let your reed be the thing that makes you think you're a bad player. We all have this tendency as musicians to kind of blame ourselves and just assume that we're just not good, or there's something that we're bad, we're not talented, we're too old, whatever your reason is. Really, you need to change that to, I just don't know how to do it yet. You can learn it. You're here, you're watching this video. Clearly you want to learn and you have what it takes to learn these things and make those notes feel easy. So let's continue on. Number 2, the second most common thing that I find that keeps people's high notes from sounding good is their air that they're blowing is not moving quickly enough. And in fact, I already hinted at that earlier when we were talking about the reed, maybe not putting out those top notes. For the clarinet, we want to use very fast air all the time. And the reason is our reed vibrates, it actually vibrates open and shut against the mouthpiece. And our goal is to have it vibrate as much as possible. Most people play with air that's too wimpy, and this is understandable. There's nobody walking around telling us to blow out of our body with really, really fast air in other areas of our life, unless maybe you're also a piccolo player or something. I think clarinet uses a faster, more compressed airstream than most wind instruments. So even if you're coming from saxophone or another instrument, clarinet uses faster air, and that's going to take some getting used to. The best way that I imagine it, if I could see the air coming out of my mouth, is just as it would be watching water come out of a garden hose that has a spray valve on it. Normally, if you just tell people to blow, and if you examine how most people blow into their clarinets, it's kind of medium spray. This big kind of gentle spray. We want to imagine that we take our spray valve and we turn it to a very small power wash, small setting. And that's what we want to do in clarinet all the time. Now, there are a lot of fantastic exercises that help train your blowing muscles, which are kind of down here around your abs, to do that properly. And this week, since you're here signed up for some high note videos, it's actually going to be the focus of one of our videos. So trust that if you hang in there and open up your next video from me that you're going to get in a few days, we're really going to dive deeper on that. But for right now, just to give you a hint of it, here's what I'll say. When I had you tongue that high C scale, if it sounded airy or if it sounded resistant, I just want you to imagine that your air gets focused much faster. And there's a common tool you can use to help warm your air up for this, and it's just a piece of paper. If you take any piece of paper and hold it at arm's length, and I'm going to turn a little sideways here So you can see, I really have it out at arm's length. If we blow kind of that fine medium spray air, we might ripple the paper a bit. You can see it moving a tiny bit. What we want to do to help our blowing muscles warm up for clarinet is try and make it horizontal. So I'm not quite fully horizontal, but I'm moving it a lot and I'm trying to hold it there for a couple seconds just with my air. If you do this about 5 times, even just taking a big breath and doing puffs of air like I'm doing now, it's a great warm-up for clarinet playing. Then, instead of doing it in a short puff, we imagine sustaining that. So it's that smaller spray valve. I've adjusted it. Then I can do my C scale again. It's the same air. If I could somehow be a human air hose attached to a clarinet-shaped mouth, or I should say a good clarinet embouchure, I could start on open G, which is just the note we play with all the holes open, and then I can move my fingers around to any note. If my air is solid, the high notes are going to feel much easier. Those high notes, really, I was trying to pretend like some robot was moving my fingers, and my concentration was fast air, I'm a human robot. A great exercise, if you have a friend who plays clarinet, is for you to focus on blowing an open G with super fast air. Spin your barrel around. So now, if I were to play, I'd put a hand on my barrel, my clarinet's backwards, I'm blowing with fast air. My clarinet playing buddy is going to come over and put their hands on the clarinet and go up and down scales on different notes. Me, as a human air hose, I don't know what notes are going to come out. And if you do this, you're going to find that some of those high notes pop out effortlessly, the way you want them to. And a lot of that is that you're not psyching yourself out. You're not thinking, uh-oh, here comes the dreaded high note. Ooh, I better back off. It might not sound so good. It's human nature that when we are about to play something we think doesn't sound good, we kind of don't want other people to hear. So we back off a bit. But backing off on our air makes the high notes harder. It doesn't work so well. And in fact, that leads to another habit. If you find your high notes squeak a lot, you're getting squeaks and tension, it's because when we find it challenging, part of our brain says, hey, that's hard. We better work harder. Ugh. And we clench up and we end up biting on the mouthpiece. Biting a little bit will cause squeaking. Biting a lot will make it feel like the air is not going anywhere and cause us to really think the notes are hard, and then maybe we back off on our air and we sort of start this cycle of bad habits. So far we've talked about your reed might be too soft. Move it higher as a test to see if it works better. Your air is likely not fast enough, and there are many good training exercises that help us. That little paper exercise is just a quick one to get you started. There's lots more. The third thing that can really make a difference in the tone quality of your high notes is what we call voicing. Voicing is what we do with our tongue inside our mouth when we're not tonguing. Now I'm going to go into more detail on this down the road, but I want to give you an introduction to it right now, because for many people this really makes a difference on their high notes. What we want on the sort of classical clarinet sound, which is what my training is, and even if you are playing jazz or folk or klezmer, where you're going to experiment more with the voicing than we tend to do in classical music, it's still useful to be able to create kind of the basic good classical clarinet sound, and then you can experiment from there. So the reason I'm holding my hand up like a little hand puppet is this is the shape we want our tongue to be in for the best sound. High and arched inside our mouth. We get that when we say the word he, and I kind of want to hiss the H part of it. He. I used to teach it as E, and I realized that when we go from E to he, it kind of raises even the sides of our tongue higher. What that produces is a little bridge in our mouth for the air to whoosh out of our windpipe through the clarinet and through our mouth and into the clarinet. We get faster air. Using that high C again, which is a super reactable note, I'm going to demonstrate something for you. I'm going to start with my tongue in what I consider the optimum position for good classical sound, he. And then I'm going to lower it. He, ah. When it's ah, it's really low in our mouth. And then I'm going to bring it back up. Listen to what happens to my tone. You definitely can hear the pitch going down. If we had a tuner, we would see my note plummeting and coming back up. It also affects what we call the timbre, which is the quality of sound. If I try that C major scale, going from C, tonguing up to high C with my tongue really low, here's what we're going to hear. And I'm not sure how this is translating through your computer, but it's a loud, kind of squawky, not so nice tone. I recognize that from my early days in playing high notes. That's how most people sound when they first start playing in the high register. And if you sound that way and you don't want to sound that way, you probably had no idea that what our old tongue does, other than tonguing, has a huge impact on our sound. One simple way to help train yourself is to wrap your lips around the clarinet as if you're playing and speak he. It would look like this. It feels very silly. But, sometimes training does silly things, but if it creates the ease of playing on high notes and the great sound we want, by all means, let's all be silly. You say he with your lips wrapped around it, and then try playing. Great notes to play are just the high G, the high A, the high B, and the high C. When you hit the high C, just sort of hold it, and if your tongue has slipped down, which it will tend to do, you can think of bringing it back up. Let me demonstrate that. I'll allow my tongue to fall a little bit, which is what happens to most people. In fact, this will be my X-ray. You get to see what my tongue is doing, but I'm going to start by saying So I didn't let it fall very much. So overall the sound was still pretty good, even when it was a little low. But you can see when I lifted it, it got a little bit more focus and a little more sparkle. And what I feel as a player is it was easier to play. So it takes concentration and training to train our tongue to sit in a different position, but the results are phenomenal in getting a much warmer, sweeter tone quality and playing more in tune. When our tongue is low, we play flat in the high register. If you play high C and it shows flat on a tuner, you have about a 90% chance that that's indicating your tongue is low in your mouth, and just training it to move higher is going to help your high notes big time. All right, I'm giving you tons of information here because I love sharing clarinet information with people. And I kind of get sad when I see people feeling frustrated or believing that they're incompetent and not talented and no good, when really there's just little things like this that they don't know yet. So hooray to you for being here and learning this stuff and trying it out, because it's definitely going to improve your high notes and make your life better. The next thing that we're not often aware of, again, as making a big difference in our high notes, is what we do with our fingers. And you might be saying, why would fingers affect our high notes? Well, part of it's very practical. One of the challenges we often have with high notes is moving from a low note up to a high note and having that high note speak right away. Now, all the things we've already talked about are going to have an influence on that, but often we don't realize that having our hands and fingers perhaps not in the best position really affect how easy it is to move between notes. And often if our fingers are in the wrong position, we end up not quite covering the holes when we change between notes, and this creates a big resistance out of our instrument. The notes feel hard to play, or they don't even come out. And then again, our first reaction is usually not to say, oh, my third finger must have been out of place. What we say is, I can't do this, and we get frustrated. And I don't want you to be frustrated. I want you to know what might be causing your trouble. There's lots of things we can talk about with fingering. What I want to do now is actually give you a complete lesson that comes out of the Mastering High Notes for Clarinet course that I have. And It's taken out of a 30-day workout, so you'll hear me refer to the fact that this is day 7 in a series of training. But I like this exercise because it stands alone really well, which is why I want to share it with you. Now, just as a prelude to it, because you haven't seen the videos that come before it, I'll show you one thing that'll make it easier for you to understand and follow along with. I spent some time talking about the ideal shape for our top finger on the left hand, especially when we want to hit this A key. And that is one of the focuses of this upcoming video that you're about to see. So here's how you can sort of, as a prelude to that, practice. Finger a low C, which is all these holes covered, trying to have your hand already touching that key a bit. And then, although this would be a nonsense note, I want you to practice hitting that key while you're covering the hole. So if you can see, I'm knocking that key open and shut. And I'm trying to notice what part of my finger is touching that key. For me, it ends up being kind of the side of my knuckle, and that's true for most people. We actually want that to be the part of our finger that we use whenever we cover this key. And often we're going up a scale, the next note on that might be a high B, and it allows this finger to get back to the hole really easily. I also talk about the thumb, but you'll see that on the video. So this is going to help us complete our number 4 thing, which is fingering. Hi, welcome to day 7 of our Mastering Clarinet High Notes workouts. You'll notice so far a lot of the exercises we've been doing are related to using our air really smoothly and moving our fingers more easily on the clarinet. There's a good reason for it. I think those are the 2 keys to making the high notes feel easier and sound better. So although the exercises might start to get more complex as we go, those are the 2 basic things we need to keep in mind. And again, I want to encourage you, if you're working on some other music outside of this course that has some tricky intervals, you can turn them into your own workouts. Just take the 2 or 3 notes that are difficult and play them slowly together, slurred, looking in a mirror, watch your hands. All the things we're talking about here apply to everything we play. I just love these workouts because it gives us a concrete way to really start to train our fingers and our body to make it feel natural. So as always, we're going to start with some long tones, as you wish, and then we're going to review W5 and W6 and any other workouts you'd like to review or add into it. And I'd like to explain W7, which we're going to add into today's worksheet. So W7 has us starting with octaves, low C up to high C. Again, left or right pinky is up to you, but it's keeping our hands close to the keys, that's important. And then we go to an A. So A to C. Well, now we're starting to get into what I think is one of the harder intervals on clarinet, because we're going from almost every hole open to almost every hole covered. If we were doing it using the classic bad habits, which most of us unintentionally learned early on because no one was telling us differently, we would have an A with our index finger way too high in the A key, our fingers flying in the air, and our thumb flying off the back, and somehow we would miraculously try and slam all of them into place and hope that they're all covering the holes, when odds are, as my right hand is doing now, we've missed a bunch of them and the note doesn't work, and then we get frustrated and we break our clarinet to bits. So don't do that. You're now starting to realize what it takes to have that good habit. So I'm gonna just practice just the fingering by looking at my hand, focusing on my thumb not moving too much, focusing on the part of my finger that's going up to the A key, focusing on keeping my right hand close to the keys, and that my wrists are not flapping around. Once I feel that's comfortable, and this would apply to both of the intervals in W7. I could go from low C to high C and just finger that interval a bit. So my thumb is moving from low to high, low to high. I'll bring my thumb closer so you can see what I'm doing there, because I'm really not moving it very much. Low, high, low, high, low, high, low, high. And the A to C. So and then I might practice just the set of 4. Low C, high C, A, C, low C, high C, A, C, not moving my fingers much. And then I'll play it. And again, I'm trying to keep my air smooth and continuous. Our body and brain are pretty smart unconsciously. If we try going, let's say from A to C, and our fingers aren't very good, and we get that delay, part of our brain goes, uh-oh, hard spot. Yeah, that doesn't sound so good. We better just back off so no one notices we're not sounding so good. And it sort of builds in this automatic turn the air down response. Oh, I'll just play really soft and no one will notice. And your brain can do this kind of without your own knowledge. It's like you have this secret little team working behind the scenes. So if you notice that you're backing off on the high notes, and this applies to all kinds of high notes, you need to override that team and convince the team that you need full participation, full out air. And if you screw up, you're just going to screw up more loudly. Big deal. You're also going to be training yourself to play with the air that really supports these notes to sound good, which is our ultimate goal. Basically, that's what we want to do. So good, fast air, and some of these intervals are quite challenging, but again, we're going to work on it over a few days until it starts to feel easier and more comfortable. And you've already done a lot of this type of work in the Crossing the Break course. We're just using this chance to refine it further, to continue to improve and get better and better habits. Thanks for being here. I'm looking forward to seeing you on day 8. Hello and welcome back here to my home studio. That was one glimpse of the type of training that we can do to just slightly rearrange how we hold our fingers or our wrists, and yet once we get comfortable with those positions and get our body physically accustomed to it, it makes our high notes much easier, especially when we have to play quickly. If I'm just playing a little arpeggio, that stuff is really hard to do if my fingers are not in the right position. It took me some real attention and concentration and time to get my fingers used to being in a better shape and closer to the holes, but I love the results. Some of my technique is so much easier now, and when I have a hard piece of music in front of me, I feel like I can master it a lot more quickly because, to be honest, those things are now just habit. They're just how I hold my fingers. But I did have to first learn how to do it, because when I started, I had all kinds of bad finger habits. I wish I'd known this stuff as a total beginner. It would have made my life a lot easier. So if you're new to clarinet, woohoo, you are lucky. Learn these good habits and it's going to make your life a lot easier. All right, the 5th thing of many that I think makes our high notes a lot harder is our attitude, our own brain. In that little video clip you just saw, we hinted that a bit, that we kind of have this red alert that goes off in our head. You all have this as an experience, or at least every clarinetist I've ever met, including myself. It's where, for me, where it comes out in high notes is sometimes I'll be reading often a contemporary piece of music and a composer's written a ridiculously high note, so high that I have to count all the little lines to figure out what it is. And I'll admit my first reaction on seeing it is, oh, it's hard, oh, I'm gonna suck, I'm gonna play that note and it's gonna sound like a horrible squeak and everyone around me is gonna think I'm a horrible player and I don't belong here. This is the story that we tell ourselves. And at any level of experience, I imagine people still have that experience. At least I do. Maybe I'm just a neurotic professional player. But here's the big advantage I have, is that now I've been able to go through many red alert experiences and learn how to go from red alert to yellow alert to, oh, actually that's not so bad. So for me now, when I have a red alert experience, I look at it and I go, interesting. I have some strange fears, don't I? However, if I can figure out the system to do that and train my air and my body to do that, I bet that's actually going to feel easier than I think. And then I apply a set of systems and techniques that I've learned, spend some time on it. Sometimes it's a couple, I put it in my practice routine, sometimes for a few days, and suddenly that note starts to feel easy and comfortable. And it takes a little bit of convincing to that inner voice in me that it really is okay. But then I realize, yeah, actually it really is okay. And then that note feels easy. I want you to have that experience. If you tell yourself, whatever the excuse is, that's too high for me, that's too fast for me, I'm too old for that, only so-and-so in my band could possibly play that, I couldn't do that, That's a really common attitude and a common response. And I'd like you to sort of add a little thing to the end, because I haven't learned how to make that feel comfortable yet. Because I haven't learned how to make it feel comfortable. And what's going to make it feel comfortable is knowing what physical thing do you need to train yourself to do to actually have that note feel easy. Clarinet's not rocket science. The things that make it easy for me are the same things that are going to make it easy for you. It's kind of knowing how to do it and then just calmly sitting down and practicing those things for a few days so that your body starts to get used to it, and then it feels better. You can make huge progress. It's really important that you have a roadmap of where you want to go and that someone is showing you, here's the systems, here's how you do it. But you can do it, for sure. So our own brain getting in our way is really one of the things that holds us back. So I just want you to really be open to the possibility that you can improve much more than you might be thinking, and that you just don't know how to do it. Well, you're smart enough to figure it out. Some of the pointers in this video already might make your high notes feel easier and better. And there's more to come. So I so appreciate you being here. I would love to hear from you. I'd like to hear what your biggest challenges are with high notes. You can fill it in the comments box below, and I would really like to hear it. I'm going to make some future videos that I'm answering those questions, and I'll also put in comments into the comments box directly. So I want you to tell me what you find as your biggest challenge. So if you've enjoyed this video, please share it with your clarinet playing friends. Many of you play in bands and you have other friends who play clarinets. Get them involved in this. We all could benefit from playing high notes better. And in our next video, I'm going to go deeper a little bit on some of the air support things about high notes, because I really think that air support is one of the keys to having high notes feel easy. Thank you so much for watching today.